Rainmakers, it is so good to be with you. I want to talk to you about something today that has actually been stewing a little bit. I feel like I've been thinking about it a lot just in my own personal journey as an entrepreneur, as we take new territory, as we do different things in both our professional and personal lives, and how that affects our life. And so it's something that I want to talk to you about. I just want to have a really open and candid conversation with you about my own process in this and hope that it inspires you, that it encourages you, and that you feel not alone in this journey. So we're just gonna have a really honest conversation today, and Steven's gonna join in, and
I'm along for the ride.
he's along for the ride. He has
I'm
no
not
idea
sure
what I'm
exactly
talking
where we're
about.
going, but I'm going to join in. It's
Yeah.
going to be great.
I've been thinking a lot lately how our lives, mine and Steven's lives, and where we spend our time, where we spend our resources, where we spend our finances, what we invest in, what we say yes to, what we say no to, and how sometimes what we have chosen because we know it's right for our family oftentimes looks really weird from an outside watching world. And what I mean by that is, let me give you some context. We live in a very small town. We love our town. We love our family. We love our friends. But being entrepreneurs, I feel like, was the very first kind of stake in the ground of like, we are going to do life differently. We're going to create a life that um, we run and we choose, and we get to choose when we clock in and when we clock out of. That was the first, I think, for me, like, big, like, oh, I'm going against the grain. I'm doing something really uncomfortable that no one in my family has really done. And then I think as we started Rainmakers, and now we run a community and we have employees and we're responsible for other people's income and like success and all of that. And then having family, and we're not even in the school age years yet, but we will be soon. And I already know that we're going to be choosing to do things a little bit differently. And that even how our approach to our health and what we choose to invest in is different. And I think that it is sometimes easier to do things against the grain, but it also can cause, I think, some friction in your life, especially when those around you don't understand. And I kind of this week was just thinking a lot about how our life and how we've chosen to do different things. And I love the life that we've created. I wouldn't change it for the world. But I am at a place in my life where I know that what we're choosing to do and how we're going to live our life is going to be different. And I'm okay with that. I'm at total peace that this is what is right for us. Um, but I don't feel like I've always been in that place.
I think you've been saying lately too, the more we continue on this pathway, the more we continue to grow, the wider the gap between like normal people and us will
Yeah.
be, and the way
Yeah.
we live our lives. I've been reading this book called 10X is Easier Than 2X.
Hmm.
It's by a favorite author of mine. I've read a lot of his other books. Him and Dan Sullivan have done these books together. And the concept is basically it's just as easy to 10X your life and business
Hmm.
as it is to 2X. It's the same amount of effort. But when you 10X, it's like a completely new you. It's completely different thinking. It's a completely weird thing
Mhm.
sometimes. There was some stat that came out. So it was like the greatest economic divide is not between different families, it's within families.
Mhm.
And so
Wow.
oftentimes you will have one person in a family who just takes off, right?
Mhm.
And there's just a huge divide between like what we are building and where we're going and what we're doing and everyone else in our family.
Mhm.
And it's a weird place to be, you know?
Mhm.
Now, of course, you do see some families where everyone's just crushing it, but this is the more common thing is that
Mhm.
there is one person who changes the family. But there's often one person, it might not be like even just look at your kids, right? You're listening to the show, you got like 5 kids, right? Look at your kids. It's probably the one you don't think is going to really take off with something, is really
Mhm.
going to take off with something. And so we're just in that place of like, we're also reading this book called Strangers in Paradise. And
Mhm.
it's about, kind of an analogy of like, when you come into wealth, it's kind of like coming into a new country.
Mhm.
It's like you immigrate from whatever country to New York City, right? And it's like a
Mm,
big cultural shift. And
mm,
same thing when you create wealth for your family, you need to now learn to live in that country. And
mm,
now you get to raise kids in that country. How do you, preserve some things from your history? How do you preserve relationships and things from your history, but also how do you, build in this new country that you live
mhm.
in?
That's a great
And so
analogy.
we are in this new country now and we're learning to live there, but life looks a lot different there than it did at the home country, back in the home country.
I guess I wanted to have this conversation because I've heard it said before, and I know that I've experienced this. Like, entrepreneurship can be lonely if you don't find community, if you don't find people to run alongside of you. And sometimes that community is people who don't live in the same area, geographical area, time zone as you. I know we've experienced that. That's why masterminds have been so vital for us because we've met people that like fully know every single part of our life and we can talk with any area, whether it's our faith, our finances, our businesses, and they get it. Whereas I think there are certain friendships, the further we go along in business, that it's like, I know that this friendship, while I love them, we're probably not going to relate on the same level as we do business or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I think this is something that isn't talked about, especially in early stage entrepreneurship. You know, we have a lot of people that come through our program or listen to episodes and they're like, "Man, my spouse doesn't get it. My spouse isn't on board. My family isn't on board." And oftentimes you'll see like there's certain people, whether it's a best friend or someone close to that you love and trust, doesn't understand why you're doing what you're doing. And at
Mhm.
first, it's like, oh, this is really uncomfortable because you used to be able to come to them with everything and now they don't. And maybe that's not your story and that's great. But I know for us, even though we had it, I can talk personally, like our family like loved that we wanted to start a business and thought it was so cool and do support us. But initially, especially on those early days with our wedding business, they're like, yeah, but don't you want to continue on this career that you were going to school for? Like they didn't get it.
Mhm.
And I can expect them to get it because that's not the life that they chose. It's not the path that they were supposed to go on. So I can't blame them or be upset at them, but I do have to realize that talking and asking for business advice from a family member who isn't a business owner is probably not going to be like the conversation we have over dinner, at least initially. And I think that as you go into different levels of being a business owner or just it doesn't even have to be
I mean, even like
business.
mindset growth.
Yes,
Like if you've done like
mindset
a ton of
growth.
inner work and like mindset growth, and then you get around like old friends who haven't done that work, and they're just saying the same stuff, and they're, and you've gone kind of beyond that. This isn't like a status thing of like, oh,
Yeah,
we're
no,
better than
not at
them,
all.
but it's just like you've done this work
Mm,
and like the language patterns that you now notice and you avoid, they're just still saying.
mhm,
Like in the 10X, Zero and 2X book, he told the story of this guy who for like years struggled with smoking. Like he tried
mm,
everything to quit smoking. And quitting smoking was like his 10X thing. He was
mhm,
like, just trying to incrementally try to quit this thing. Dan Sullivan, who co-wrote this book, um, knew about this program. It was like this thing you could go to over, it was like a 1 or 2 week thing. And it had like great results with helping people quit smoking. And so they sent the guy this thing. He did the work. And he said the hardest part about quitting smoking
mhm,
was I had to stop hanging out with all my friends
hmm.
because all his friends smoked.
Wow.
And so that was his realization that for him to actually quit smoking, which he did, and he never smoked again after that weekend. The realization that he had to have was that he had to stop being around those people
Mm,
because it was just like, yeah, like you like being around those people, but that's what they do together. That's like their common thing that
mhm,
they did together. And that was the aha moment he had to have to step out of that old identity into something new.
mhm,
And so, yeah, as you're doing the work, as you're growing your business, we have found this with just, I think, two things. Like, if you've done the work, it's not to say, hey, just poo poo all your relationships
yeah,
and like, whatever. Cause like certain relationships do certain things. And we can't expect every relationship to
yeah,
fill every
not at
bucket or
all.
every cup. We should be filling that stuff in other ways. But we have kind of learned that like certain friendships, like kind of do fill one bucket. And
Mhm,
we just like got to know that going into, like, we're hanging out with these people and here's where we have, we call this virtue. This is
mm,
something that our mentor really talked about, he's like, you got to find relationships where you just have like virtue flowing. It's just
Mhm.
like you're giving, they're giving. It doesn't feel like sucking like something out
Mhm.
of you. And it's just like, those conversations you're with like that friend is just like flowing, it's just
Mhm.
like, oh, this is like life giving, right? That's like virtue. And so he was just like, go into these relationships knowing like, hey, we have a lot of virtue with this couple friend over here in the parenting realm. We both have
Mhm.
kids and we just talk parenting, but we're not going to probably talk about, how to save six figures in your taxes this year. Like that's not a problem that they have. And like if we talk about money like that, it's going to trigger weird stuff, right? So we just have
Mhm.
like this off limits zone over here. We just like talk about this. Then we have other friends over here that we can talk all business with, but like maybe we don't go the spiritual side of things, but we'll just talk business, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why Chelsea said like we love masterminds because we've been able to find people like there's very specific masterminds out there. We've been able to find people that like we can be ourselves in all areas of life in the conversation and there's virtue flowing in all those things.
Mhm.
That's so cool. We haven't found that in our local small town,
Mhm.
and if you're not finding that in your local small town, that's okay. Get online because you can find people. And then the relationships you do have, we always like to focus on what you have and not what you have not, right? So in the relationships you do have, you kind of go to like, okay, what in this relationship can I lean into that I do love? And
Mhm.
maybe you don't agree on every single thing there, but there is a thing that you can find virtue in. And you just know that going into that
Mhm.
relationship or that hanging out time, that, like that's where the life is there. And I'm probably just going to like kind of put
Yeah.
this other part of me on the side for just a little bit and just live there. And that's what works for us right now.
Mm.
And it's not to say that you can't share things about the business or you can't help people grow in this area if they're interested in it. But we've just kind of found that in the season. And we've had to kind of like stop hanging out with certain, relationships or people where just like it didn't fit in the next
Mhm.
season.
Yeah. So I guess I want to leave you with three things that I think are important takeaways for you to evaluate especially when you do go against the grain and when you decide to put your stake in the ground and say, I'm going to do things differently. And I think three things. So number one, I think it is totally normal to feel a little bit like that fish out of water through different points of life when you choose to do things differently. And I'm at a point now where I am a little bit of a fish out of water, but I'm like comfortable out of the water, like I'm still surviving, I'm thriving, I'm doing really well. And it's okay that I look like the fish out of water walking down the street. So I want to give you permission that it's okay to do things differently. It's okay to know what your needs are and what you stand for as a family, and more power to you. I think that's absolutely incredible. And like, who cares what people think? It matters what you say yes to. Your values, why you're doing it. So keep running that race, regardless of what anyone else has to say or their negative Nancy opinions. Like, just brush them off. So I want to say that first of all. It's totally normal. I want to say number two, that if you do not have community, especially in business, there are so many incredible masterminds out there that you can find other like-minded people and pour into those relationships and be a giver. Steven and I this year are in two incredible masterminds and we love those people. We're going to do vacation with those people. Those are the friends that I'm like texting randomly about all kinds of advice or things that I need. Those are the friends that I'm like pouring into. And the thing is, right now, at least, none of those people live in the same town as us, and that's okay. And then I would say number three to just kind of leave you with to think about is what Stephen touched on. And that is, I do think having local community and people in your area is important because you don't want to be so isolated that like all you have is internet friends. I think that there's something to be said about in person things, whether you're flying to a mastermind event. But I do think that you can find people locally that you can somewhat relate with. But you just have to know, like Steven said, going into it, is this a friend that there's virtue flowing on a certain area that we can go really deep on? Or am I just going to this event because I want to have a play date for my kid? And that brings me joy knowing that our son is having friends and playing with them. But I think you just kind of have to know that going into, and it feels weird to say that. It feels weird to compartmentalize and to really think through that. Like I never thought that I would experience this ever.
Mm.
It is, living in a small town in entrepreneurship, regardless. I never thought that sometimes when you're in such a growth mindset, not everybody is, and that's okay. And so I've learned to be okay with where I'm at, know that I am on the right path, that Steven and I can make powerful decisions for our family, for our business. We can go against the grain and it's going to be okay because that is what we're called to do. And then know that like not all of our best friends might live around us. And then it is still possible to have somewhat of a community. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to bring that with you. It's something that like I said, I've been talking about a lot. And I was just like, man, we need to do a podcast episode of our process with this because I don't think everybody is talking about this
Yeah.
and it needs to be talked about.
I think one other thing, like Chelsea, you've heard her talk about her dream week. If you haven't
Mhm.
heard that, go look it up on the podcast. Really powerful episode. Like, but we in this season have young kids. We have a high level business. We have a big team. Like, there is only so much time we really want to steward it. And
Mm.
so I know this sounds awkward and weird. We didn't like physically do this, but I was kind of like, hey, let's bring back the MySpace top 8. Remember that? I don't know if it was 8, but like, you remember on
I
MySpace
forget what
when you
number
could
it
like rank
was.
your friends?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. There's so much drama around that.
Oh, yeah.
But it is like we did not put it on paper, but we did have a conversation about this because it's like, okay, here's all my friends. Chelsea was kind of like, here's all the people I'm in a relationship with. And then we looked at which ones are the highest virtue in all those areas, friendships. Because if she has limited time to pour into people,
Mhm.
let's pour into those relationships.
Mhm.
Right. And the ones that are lower virtue or, sometimes life giving, sometimes draining, like those ones are going to be on her calendar a little bit less in this season.
Your time is
Yeah.
valuable.
Because your
Your
time is
time is
valuable.
valuable. Your mental energy is valuable. And if you're meeting up with people who aren't giving you life, so they're soul sucking, that aren't doing anything for you, it's time to cut it and it's okay. And I really wrestled with this in the last couple of months on a specific thing that I don't want to go into detail about. And I am okay that I'm choosing to say no to that. And I didn't have to explain it to anybody. I just said, you know what? In this season, I'm not doing it. And that is okay. All right.
Mm.
So thanks for listening to a very candid conversation that Stephen and I had today. We hope you really feel like you're just sitting across from us on our big, white, fluffy, comfy couch downstairs on our living room. But yeah, we care about you. We care that you know that you can do it, that you can go against the grain, that you can do you, and that community is a piece of it. But just rethinking, what does community look like for me, both virtually and in person? So we hope you love this episode. Make sure to share it with a friend who might need to hear this message today.
It would mean the world to us if you
Oh,
left a
yes.
review for this podcast. It's
Yes.
been a little bit since we asked. If you're a consistent listener to this podcast, if you found any value in any of these episodes, any life hacks or things that have just helped you out moving the needle in your business, your life, we would love a review on Apple Podcasts. So go find us on Apple Music or however you find us and leave a review. It would mean the world to us. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. Hey, if you are not a part of our Rainmaker Mastermind, we have a new opportunity for you to book a one-on-one strategy call with one of our Rainmaker coaches.
If you want to get a call with them, see if it's a good fit for you to work with us to build a business that allows you to have time freedom and financial freedom, you can get that call at makeitrainmama.com/podcast. That's makeitrainmama, MOMMA.com/podcast.